night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a serious matter.
Hi again, everyone. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. You remember it exactly 4 years ago yesterday, election night 2020, when the loser of that election spoke out and declared an early and incorrect victory for himself. When he told the election workers to stop counting votes because there was fraud. There was never any fraud. He was always lying. We know now that he was told there was no fraud. The lies he told then and continues to spread now incited a deadly insurrection ahead of President Joe Biden's inauguration. Trump ended up leaving the White House, getting on his plane, heading back to his club at Mar-a-Lago. But according to what he said over the weekend, he wants a redo. Wished he hadn't done that.
The day that I left, I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well.
You did fine, but you lost. New York Times reports this, quote, the remark echoed what Trump told aides within days of his 2020 election loss, that he wasn't going to leave the White House, quote, I'm just not going to leave, Trump told one aide. He told another, quote, we're never leaving, and added, quote, how can you leave when you won an election? Because he didn't. But this time, there is one big difference that will make sure that history does not repeat. The Daily Beast reports this, quote, Donald Trump won't succeed if he tries to stir a violent overthrow of the 2024 presidential election results for one essential reason. He is not in power. Kamala Harris's senior campaign official said Sunday, quote, currently we have a president in the White House who respects elections, respects the will of the voters, respects the rule of law, and instead of advancing and supporting a coup, is going to use the federal government to ensure that everything happens as smoothly and peacefully in the transition of power as it should, the official told reporters during a call. It is true the individual in power does have a reverence to the Constitution and the peaceful transfer of power, something Donald Trump could never say. But the lies that have already been propagated by the ex-president and his allies for years now have never receded. They've been repeated. They're more sunk in now than before. And Trump's backers believe the lies about fraud in 2020 so intrinsically. They've been so primed to believe that it'll happen again in 2024 that they're organizing ahead of time this time around. Another piece of reporting in the New York Times says this, quote, groups backing Trump recently sent messages to organize poll watchers to be ready to dispute votes in Democratic areas. Some posted images of armed men standing up for their rights to recruit for their cause. What cause? Others spread conspiracy theories that anything less than a Trump victory on Tuesday would be a miscarriage of justice worthy of a revolt. New York Times analysis of more than 1 million messages across nearly 50 Telegram channels with over 500,000 members found a sprawling, interconnected movement intended to question the credibility of the presidential election, to interfere with the voting process and potentially dispute the outcome. That's where we are. But to anyone planning on doing anything like that in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia District Attorney had some choice words for you.
Anybody who thinks it's time to play militia, F around and find out. Anybody who thinks it's time to insult, to deride, to mistreat, to threaten people, F around and find out. We do have the cuffs, we do have the jail cells, we do have the Philly juries, and we have the state prisons. So if you're going to try to turn an election into some form of coercion, if you're going to try to bully people, bully votes or voters, you're going to try to erase votes, you're going to try any of that nonsense, we're not playing. F around and find out. That's what we're going to do. If any of you are on your little Slack communications back and forth saying, won't this be fun? You can have your fun in a jail cell, because that's what's coming.
Now, the efforts to combat Donald Trump's lies and the violence that they may put into motion, people in charge of ensuring a fair election and a peaceful transfer of power in America, is something we've focused on for 4 years now, and it's where we start today. With voting rights attorney, founder of the site Democracy Docket, Mark Elias. His firm has been retained by the Harris campaign ahead of the election. And with me at the table, law professor at Hofstra University, former attorney at the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program, James Sample, is back. Mark Elias, I start with you. I first saw the F around, and I love that we are talking about enforcing our laws, because there are laws against voter fraud. It's already a crime. So the voter suppression laws were passed in the absence of both fraud and a lack of laws to enforce voter fraud. But I find it ominous that the chatter is such that we need to platform the message that the laws will be enforced on Election Day. What are you seeing and hearing?
So, look, let me start with some good news. You know, tens of millions of Americans have already voted. They have gone to the polls in early voting states. They have gotten their mail-in ballots, and they have returned them if they want to vote by mail. And tomorrow, that concludes with in-person voting on Election Day. Now, that won't be the end of the vote counting process, and people are going to need to have a little bit of patience around that. But, you know, democracy is working. Now, it is not because Donald Trump wants it to work. It is not because the Republican Party is doing anything but trying to throw sand in its gears. But it is working because in our system of elections, which relies on tens of thousands of election workers around the country, they are doing their job. And voters are voting. So I want to always be realistic about Donald Trump. He will lie, as you said. He lies about everything, and he will lie about the outcome of the 2024 election, just like he lied about the outcome of the 2020 election. But just like in 2020, his lies were met in court, and they lost, and they will be met again in the court of public opinion and in court if necessary, and they will lose again.
James, let me show you something that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said. He was the Attorney General 4 years ago.
Well, let's be clear. In 2020, we had a free and fair, safe and secure election. I was the Attorney General back then. Donald Trump and his allies took me to court 43 different times. They went 0-43. I went 43-0, and we had a free and fair, safe and secure election. And the lawyers who Donald Trump sent to court to lie on his behalf, folks like Rudy Giuliani, lost their law licenses because they lied in our courts. Donald Trump was in Pennsylvania today lying about our elections. We will once again have a free and fair, safe and secure election, and the will of the people will be respected and protected.
I forgot that it was 43 cases in Pennsylvania alone. What is the scale that we should anticipate this time?
Well, it was 43 cases in Pennsylvania alone, but it was also 60-plus cases around the country, Mark's firm litigating many of those. And across the board, Donald Trump lost. And the reason he kept losing is that it's one thing to make a claim in a press conference. It's one thing to make a claim while your hair dye is dripping down your forehead at Four Seasons Landscaping. It's another thing in court. And the reality of court, where evidence matters, where facts require actual evidence, is that Donald Trump has lost again and again in election contexts and has lost again and again in other contexts, be they civil. So whether it's a jury of 9 individuals unanimously finding him guilty of sexual abuse or liable for sexual abuse in a civil case, or whether it's 12 jurors finding him guilty of 34 counts, felony counts in a criminal context, whether it's a judge in the context of a New York civil fraud case, when facts matter, when there is actual evidence, when Mark's team does what Mark's team does so well, Donald Trump loses. So there's no question whatsoever. Tomorrow night, at some point, you can take it to the bank. Donald Trump will claim that he won. Now, it's very possible that at some point down the road, he may end up being the victor in this election. But you know this, he will not have won when he claims that he did.
It's such an important sort of viewer's guide to tomorrow night.